going to be on the dot here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special meeting this morning. I'm going to call it to order. I have sincere regrets from Councillor Bell, but we do have quorum and we'll proceed at this time. And I'm going to ask you to observe a moment of silent reflection with me. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I just remind you, it can be brought forward at any time that it occurs to you. And I need a motion to move into committee of the whole. To have a mover and seconder, moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Bartley. All in favor? And we'll turn it over to CAO Rob Armstrong.
Thank you. So the purposes of today is to basically continue the dialogue with regard to Council's strategic priorities as we continue to finalize and develop, and also to highlight the next steps and where we go from here and what homework you will have following tomorrow, as I will explain in the presentation. I think one of the key things as we as staff have been working through this strategic priorities, we just felt it was very important for Council to understand what we call the big picture, everything that's going on and everything that we're dealing with. It's not intended in any way to inform or shape Council strategic priorities. They are your priorities. It's just more about highlighting everything that we're dealing with and how everything is interrelated in everything that we do. So that's the primary purpose of today, is providing some additional background, having some dialogue, getting some confirmation on some steps that we've already taken in doing that. So look forward to this morning. How long will take will just really depend on the dialogue. The presentation isn't overly long, but it's more about the dialogue and things like that. So where we wanted to start is, I know at the other workshops, we had a lot of discussion about the mission, vision, values and getting confirmation. Do we want to bring forward the mission, vision, and values from the previous strategic plan forward? It's our understanding that Council did want to reconfirm when we do consider the approval of the strategic plan. So I just want to take us back through that mission, vision, values again, just to see if there's anything else that you may want to change, because it really drives Council's strategic priorities and those that are, when you look at the reading of the different stuff. So with regard to the vision, the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay, we didn't hear any of the Council indicate that they had any concern with that vision of Council. One of the things we've sort of expanded on in this presentation is on really expanding on the vision, I guess. And we consider the 4 vision statements to be how we are going to be the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay. And it's to strengthen our community, ensuring sustainability, investing in infrastructure, and growing our economy. We also thought it was very important, and maybe we didn't do it in the first workshop, is to provide the narrative that was in the strategic plan on how Council wants to really achieve that vision and what are some of the parameters to that. I won't go through these individually. You have the presentation, you've seen it, but this is the narrative on each one of these. If you want to ask questions, provide comments, change any as we have these. More than willing to take it. This is a workshop. It's informal. Just reach out, put up your hands, and we can talk about those if you want. But these are right from the previous strategic plan that that council had approved, and sort of explaining what we mean by strengthening our community and how we will do that.
Through your worship, if I may, and thank you and good morning, everyone. And thank you, CIO Armstrong, for allowing us the opportunity to interrupt with questions, because as I've thought about this since the last workshop, I'm wondering if council would be interested in having a discussion about our vision, the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay. I know that has been our vision for the past 8 years and has served us well. And I'm coming around to thinking that we have pretty much become the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay. And I'm just wondering if there's interest in a discussion on perhaps changing that in some fashion to reflect the Meaford of today and the municipality that we know is going to evolve in the next number of years with the growth that is upon us. So I have a few thoughts. I don't have anything necessarily to offer in terms of a change to that vision. I have some thoughts, but first of all, I just thought I'd put that out there and see if other members of council were interested in talking about that.
Some input on that thought, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. I appreciate your comments. I rebuttal them with Meaford is a wonderful place, and it is about to happen. But we are not the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay, as Wasaga Beach, Collingwood, Town of Blue Mountains has surpassed just about anybody in what's happening. So we're coming, but I don't think we are the end all to be all in the statement that you've just made. Thank you.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Echoing that, and to me, it's a very generic slogan that you're right, any community along the way could say. I really feel that, and again, this is workshopping, but I think something that definitely more germane to Meaford, that literally says something specific about Meaford, to me would be more apt, because that is the definition of generic to me.
Other comments? Oh, Matt?
Thank you, McKenna. Just to follow up on those comments and what Rob's been saying, I agree that the place to be on Southern Georgian Bay is fairly generic, but I really encourage council to look at the 5 slides here that talk about the things that we wrote underneath each of the headings, strengthening our community, investing in infrastructure, and so on, because this community one up now is a really good example of it. This to me is a vision statement. The place to be on Southern Georgian Bay is a tagline. This is a vision statement. It's strongest when our voices are heard together. We aim to bring together the many communities into one cohesive whole, inspiring openness and confidence in leadership, empowered by volunteers, celebrating diverse backgrounds. You know, these are very much statements that say what we want to be. And we've got 5 of those in 5 very distinct areas of things that over the last 8 years, councils up to now have said, these are the types of things we want to focus on. So, you know, we can have a tagline vision, but we can also have just these as this is our vision as a municipality. It can be one thing, it can be lots of things, but I think we do have lots of words already that are pretty Meaford specific and pretty sort of ambitious, I think.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree 100%. I think those are encompassing of the greater vision. Nobody goes to a website and looks to read all those 4 or 5 points. I'm talking about the tagline truly being what is representative of Meaford. The place to be in Southern Georgian Bay, again, is very generic. And to tell somebody, yeah, but read further and you'll see why it's the place to be, is not realistic. New York is not delving down into 24 more pages of why New York's New York. So that's more the point, is just something to me, it's just very milquetoast.
Anyone else have anything to add to this conversation at this point? just maybe say that I hope we do have some good discussion today. And I'd certainly like to talk, have a lot more talk about, growing our economy and also a visioning process going forward, because I think that we owe our electorate a visioning process. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, your worship. I'm great with the tagline, and I think we should go with it forward. In strengthening our community, there is a statement about halfway through it that I like it, but it says celebrating our diverse backgrounds means ensuring Meaford is a welcoming home for everyone. And correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but our backgrounds are fairly limited when it comes to diversity. We are British Isles and we are First Nations, and in today's world, I'm proud of those backgrounds, but is that reaching out? Is it limiting? Here again, I don't know how closely people are going to read that and think about it, but I just throw that out for opinion.
I'll answer that one at least to start with, because as somebody from one of those backgrounds, but also I think about reading this, we should remember that we're not reading it as the people sat around this table. When I think when we talk about celebrating our diverse backgrounds, it's talking about celebrating the community's diverse backgrounds. And increasingly, and hopefully even more to increase, we do have pretty significant diverse backgrounds, and we should be doing more to celebrate that, to make people feel welcome. One of the things last week at the all staff meeting, Deepika from the Grey Bruce Local Immigration Partnership came and presented to everybody, and a number of us spoke to her for some time afterwards, and I was on the partner council meeting later on that day. And one of the things that we really need to recognize as a community is that we are becoming more diverse, and part of becoming more diverse is giving people a sense of belonging. That was the word that Deepika used an awful lot last week. And I think by doing this, by celebrating diverse backgrounds, helps people to feel that we belong. And it, in my opinion, at least, it should be an aim and a vision of the municipality that we are a background where everybody feels that they belong and are welcomed here.
Go ahead, Tori.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And just to add to that, I think the way you were reading it, Councillor Greenfield, is that like our is referring to the municipal background instead of referring to the community. And so I think it's how you read it. And so maybe there's a way that the word our could be changed to represent it differently. But I think the intention of that, as Matt had identified, is that it's not representing Meaford's background and what Meaford has seen in the past, but what the people of Meaford, what their background is.
So are we ready to move on at this point? Deputy Mayor, are you satisfied with that?
Thank you, Worship, for the opportunity to comment. Yeah, it's just something I'll continue to think about. I don't disagree with Councillor Bartley in suggesting that we're not there yet. I think that we are becoming, really recognized and really acknowledged as a place where people want to be. And I will just continue to think. I think my train of thought was something along the lines of, Meaford becoming a place where people, using our Love It Here tagline, where people love living and doing business, something along those lines, to reflect that we are a place that is progressive, where people can get things done and where they are happy to have chosen to live here. So I know that is somewhat reflected in the defined visions going forward. So I'll just continue to muddle on it. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Forder.
All right. Yeah, pardon me for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I think that we're heading down the right path here. Now, when I look at the vision, the place to be in southern Georgian Bay, to me, that does read as like a tagline, because that really doesn't encompass everything that's in the vision. So I think what we need to do is sort of identify is that one little sentence encompassing everything with the expanded vision of strengthening community, ensuring sustainability, et cetera. I would like to work on this and try to refresh it and maybe come up with some new copy that would be more reflective of this council's values and the changes in the community. But I do see them as two different things. I truly don't see that one sentence as being a vision statement. I see that as being like a tagline. Like if you're advertising for a business like Nike, just do it. That's not a vision statement. That's a tagline to sort of sum up the brand in a way. And if we think of the municipality as a brand, we can have a slogan, but then we can also have an expanded vision statement where we go into a little bit more detail. And we could always look to other municipalities that have done this to the degree that we are looking for, and sort of just model that mentality. That's something that I would like to see, is just maybe having a look at the paragraphs that expand the vision and maybe coming up with a new, I don't know if you call it a slogan or a tagline, but I feel like we should put our own fingerprint on this and update it in a way that we feel is reflective of what's happening in the municipality currently and where we strive to be in the future.
Back to you, Rob.
Unless there's any other comments, I guess if council wants to just look at tweaking this, I think that's a good opportunity. It doesn't send us into a whole other exercise. What we could do as homework for the next meeting, it's going to be another workshop that we have in July. Then we can have a focus part of that session on bringing back some of your thoughts on those 4 paragraphs in the vision in that regard, and talk about it. We can get it reconfirmed as part of that process. I think that's probably a good way to take good use of our time instead of today breaking it up.
I think just to add to that, McKenna, you just mentioned the words visioning process, and I've heard that once or twice over the last couple of months. If we want a visioning process, if we want to go out to the public about community vision and things, I would in part say we've already done that through the official plan. But if you want to go out to the public to have a more significant process than editing what we already have, then I think that's a council priority. That's something that needs to be added to one of these lists as to how we're going to do it. It's not a sort of a random add-on afterwards, because if my other opinion on that front is that if you as a council believe that we need a new community vision that takes time, we perhaps shouldn't be adopting strategic priorities until you have that vision, because maybe those priorities don't match that vision.
Mr. Voigt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think Matt hit a couple of good points there. If a vision is going to be effective, it is, again, forward-looking, right? It is about what, and I I believe that's what the deputy mayor will say. Your greatest sense of that people and businesses see in terms of what's being delivered on that vision is not the words on the paper, it's the actions of council and the community members, and it's your budget, and it's things like that. The worst case scenario when you have this visioning stuff, it's like trying to give yourself a nickname, right? It's your actions. People will know you for what you've done or are doing. It can be helpful, but it can also be very, very painful and become almost meaningless if it's not executed well. So I think maybe Matt's got a point there. If council does want to do that, it's something that this table and others would put a bit more serious thought into than just trying to tweak something at the last minute, because it can be valuable if done right.
Thank you. Councillor Yerig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to your point, Matt, I agree with the first part. Second part was when you said that then maybe you need to revisit kind of strategic priorities that fit this. And I don't think that's the case. What I think what we're talking about, I think what we're talking about is the strategic priorities in place. The kind of vision is in place. What we're talking about is a tagline or slogan that captures what we're already defined. So we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of the whole strategic priorities. What we're doing is putting our moniker, our advertisement, or our out-facing to the world definition of what we are. So I think that's reverse engineering what you're talking about, not driving it from this to that.
Thank you. I think that's great if that's what everybody thinks it is.
Are we ready to go back to the presentation? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was actually going to go the second part, which Matt did, so that was good. If you didn't, but no, that's it's good. Yeah, if it's the tagline, that's something that we can do at the workshop, the next workshop, if you want to just think about it. And I think that's a lot less than going through the visioning that we've already been through to some degree, and there's another component that we're hoping to tie to economic development too as well, in the not too distant future. Okay, I won't go through the rest of these. No sense highlighting those, but insurance sustainability, investing in infrastructure. I think there was a lot of thought that went into these words when they were created, and really drives a lot of the projects. And when you look at some of the projects we're seeing, some of them definitely do fit into this. When we look at mission, so how is council going to achieve their goals and priorities? And the mission that we had was provide leadership and effective governance. So it's what is council's role in all of this? It's really governing and leadership in delivery of quality, sustainable services. Sustainable is a big word. It's a hard to find word a lot of times, but it's critical that we have to ensure that our services are sustainable in the long run. It's something that we can afford, something that we can deliver, and not jeopardize things. And then the leading in municipal government is sort of expanding on the mission. You'll recall through the last time when we did the strategic priorities, leading in municipal government was one of those potential visions, but we really see this as the mission. And we sort of broken it off and included in this. And I really like the way that actually it was Matt that sort of broke it out and led this, and really like how we sort of, this is our mission, those are the vision, and did that. So it's building on the other. Okay. And then we have the values. I think as has been said, you can probably go to municipality and they all a lot of times have the same values: respect, integrity, and community. They're all good values to have, and it's how we continually operate, and how council operates. Coming out of the session, the last session that we had an agreement. There was some voting on which should be in and which shouldn't. And this is the current list of council's draft priorities. Almost all draft. There is one that has been approved. So as we look at them, we had one that's climate change mitigation and resiliency. Municipal environment regulation for development projects, municipal tree inventory. So when you see an asterisk, as notes on the next slide, when you see an asterisk, council has already provided budget funding through the last budget cycle in 23, and those projects are already underway. EV chargers, actually there's no asterisks there. However, we are working with the county right now, who's working with a number of other counties with a supplier bringing EV chargers to municipalities, and we've been selected to one of them. So we are working on it to some degree already on that one. The water and wastewater master plan, the update to the master plan that was done a number of years ago. Expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. We're well into the environmental assessment for that process. Hope to conclude the environmental assessment this fall, and then rolling into detailed design following that. So you know that that's being funded. We're finalizing the request for proposals on the water and wastewater rate study. So that's how we charge, not how much we charge, but how we charge the different types of units. The request for proposals is being finalized. It was something that was funded for this year from council. Rural telecommunication conduit framework. Long-term facilities portfolio management. This is where we are going with all of our facilities. We know that we have issues with our community center. We have issues with the pool. We have challenges with admin space. This is to look at everything holistically together and the entire portfolio and create a strategic plan going forward on all our priorities with the financial wherewithal that we have. The downtown public realm plan. This is what's going to happen to the downtown area. And then the market square, to reestablish the market square and what we're going to do from there. Implementation of the community well-being plan. Look at all our parks and how we're going to manage all of our parks. We have a number of parks plans. So what are our priorities for that? Municipal housing affordability measures, what we're doing there. And there's a lot of work going on at the county level right now in bringing all municipalities together to work together on that. So it's I don't remember that. And then the short-term rental licensing, council's already approved that charter, and that project is now underway as well. So that's just the highlight of those that council approved coming out of the last session. As I noted, today is just intended to give you a wider context of everything that that affects project charters and how they're being developed. So just more background for council in doing so. And one of the questions, and maybe we can have council can speak a bit to this, is what do you want to achieve within your term of council for this next term? Is what is you're looking to achieve? And we're not talking, it might not necessarily be a specific project, and maybe just some dialogue so that we as staff and the rest of council can understand how that relates to the priorities, because really what you want to achieve is achieved through priorities. So we just want to make sure that as we work through these priorities that we're hitting the mark and council's hitting the mark in developing these priorities as you work through. So I'll turn it back over to council if you want to have a bit of a dialogue on what do you want to achieve?
Well, I have a prepared statement at the end of this, but what do other people want to achieve? Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing under strategic priorities that we really didn't, I don't think, discuss, and it's an umbrella again. So when we talked about, obviously TCE is huge. This is a big impact on our community. And that didn't really fall under the conversation of strategic priorities. And yet to me, it seems like it should, because what we need to do in our term is set up the next term and the following term and the future of this municipality. And if TCE is going to be part of that conversation and the community benefits is going to be part of that growth, then that really should be a priority of what we're doing and what that's going to look like moving forward. So that really, I don't know, again, I don't know how that falls as a definition. Like you said, it's not a specific project, but it's all encompassing. So
yeah, just on that, like when we talk about with staff, we believe that's a priority as well that we need to be working on. As long as they're going forward, we have to have the resources available. Now, a lot of it's coordinating and outside resources, but we are going to need to be on the pulse of that and dealing with that if we want to take full benefit of what could potentially come. We also need to be on it with regard to our commitment to the environmental review and reporting back and hearing from the consultants on that review. So yes, it is something that we need to be aware of.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, not recognizing that we're not talking about a specific project within this discussion. I think what I want to see is Meaford looked upon as the place where that's just desirable, a place where people feel they can get things done, where it's a place that is progressive, that it's, we always talk about the vibrancy of our downtown, where people look upon us as being a beautiful community, that that we set ourselves apart from our neighbors in such a way that, people choose to want to live here and do business here. And I think that comes through, us working together. And I know that's an overused term, but I think we do have a ways to go in terms of, communication, which we often talk about as well, and addressing, some of the negativity in our municipality and how we do that, and how we provide information to the public in such a way that everybody has a solid understanding of what our goals are and where we're headed. And that together we want to be, that vibrant, flourishing, beautiful municipality that just in some way sets ourselves apart. And I think that some of that will come through the engagement with DC Energy, should that go forward. And certainly that's a big part of growing our economy, and how we link that into this, I think, is an important conversation. But I just feel that we're on, such a precipice here. We really are about to see major change in this municipality. Just the whole face of Meaford is going to be different. And how do we collectively embrace that through this process to be prepared for that? And I just those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Who is going to go next? We've had a little time to think about this. Nobody jumping forward. Was that a hand up? Okay. Well, okay. Councillor Greenfield, thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know you're anxious to get in on this, but I'm under ensuring sustainability. If we can step back a couple of slides. The last sentence, creating the right environment for success today will permit this municipality to preserve and improve for generations to come. Now, when I read the word environment, I'm not thinking only of the natural environment, but I'm thinking of the business environment, the potential business environment. And I'm wondering, do we have that, or could we improve upon that? That in environment for moving economical projects forward. I'm not sure if we have all the spokes in the wheel for that, and if for some reason we don't, then are we impeding that progress? Hope I've explained myself. That's a decent manner.
Councillor Yorick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You do a word search of your whole presentation, the word culture does not come up in there once. Which I think when you talk about all the buzzwords kind of that everybody uses nowadays, but it's germane because it is the culture of our community that is important, and whether it be arts and culture or literally the culture of past cultures or present cultures, future cultures. I just think that's also kind of missing in this whole scenario, is just addressing that. Not trying to just say it's a fancy way of just saying replace one word with another, because if you actually look up synonyms of culture, a lot of these aren't even in there. So again, I just think that's something we're kind of missing in this overall encompassing vision as well, is just everything has to have a culture, whether it's literally staff to council, whether it's our face to public, or whether it's community as a whole. So I just think we need to also keep that in mind about moving forward, what we want to think about.
I'm going to just, since nobody else is going to speak at this point, tell you what I think. I campaigned on a platform of positive change. And I want the electorate to be able to say, we have had change and it has been positive. And I want them to see some positive changes kind of quickly. And at the end of the term, I don't want there to be any doubt that things have changed and they've changed for the better. For too long, far too long, this municipality has been caught up in a can't-do attitude. I know that, and I'm speaking here of senior management, and I don't. In other words, let me just put it this way: I think we have a lot of ability to do whatever we want in our ranks, but there seems to be, at the moment, significant development interest in the municipality, but people are finding it extremely difficult to accomplish anything, and they're complaining about a lack of response to their efforts to get unstuck in our development processes. So a lot of the presentation today is really a reality check for council. And I believe council understands what staff is up against here. But every single municipality in Ontario and Canada and worldwide has exactly the same problems we have. Every place has the same problems. And I don't see them taking a pause on development because of it, or deciding that councillors need more education to understand the challenges that we have in today's world. What I'm really looking for in this term is for senior staff to embrace the once or twice in a lifetime opportunity to grow and prosper our municipality. And I'm looking for leadership that is focused on council's priorities. And I'll end there. Does anyone else on council have anything to say? Thank you.
So just as we leave the question is ensuring that the priorities that council selects are delivering on what council wants to achieve by the end of your term. That's the whole rationale for this discussion, and that as we look to finalize those. You've mentioned some things, and just ensuring that I think the deputy mayor highlighted on some things. I look at some of the priorities, and yeah, they're geared just to doing that very thing, and that understanding the cultural side, ensuring sustainability, ensuring this community grows in a sustainable format, that we're not just allowing anybody to do what they want. We need to ensure that we're growing. And that was the purpose of getting the official plan in place and doing so. So that was the sole purpose of going through that exercise and just framing it as well. When we look beyond council's priority, and I look back on my career that I've been here, and rightfully so, many other municipalities are dealing with these same things. What used to be a lot simpler has become a lot more complex due to quite extensive amount of issues and things that we deal with within our day-to-day operations. We have millions and millions of dollars worth of assets that haven't been properly maintained over the years, and now we're into replacement or possibly maintenance of those, which tap into our financial resources in doing so. We need to, a lot of times we have to focus on that less exciting stuff. Records management as an example. I look back to the 2010 service delivery review that was done by a community group, and it was highlighted as one of the main things that this municipality needs to look at is records management. It's very complex. It's very time consuming when you don't have good records. Records management is a lot of work on both ends. It's setting up the system that works, but it's also ensuring that everyone, and when I say everyone, every staff member is doing the records management. This year, we have significantly more, I guess is the word. I don't have the number off my head. 15 FOI requests, Freedom of Information requests. Prior to that, we used to have 1 or 2 a year. What does that mean? It means significant time where you're going back into records and providing all records that you have available over that period of time if you're one of the ones that has been asked for. So that's just a highlight of, and if the records are great and records management's in place, then that makes it a lot easier. So we just need to stay focused and stay doing that, but it takes a lot of time and resources to do that. Legal risk and property issues. It's almost weekly that we get contacted for some property or legal matter that probably should have been dealt with 50 years ago that we're now dealing with. And we had one that we were dealing with last week that will come to council that there's an old plan of subdivision where there's some land that was not properly dedicated. Now we're being reached out saying, does the municipality want it? What do you want to do? That's not just a simple, no, we don't. Yes, we do. We've got to reach out to surrounding neighbors, talk to them, see what they want. That's a lot of work in doing that. Found some literature back in the 70s when we were putting a sewer line in, municipal sewer line. And it was highlighted in those minutes that the municipality did not own the land to which we were putting the sewer line, and maybe we should deal with that. It never got dealt with back then, and we are now dealing with it now, and have been for the last couple of years. So those are just the type of things that come forward on a weekly basis that take a lot of our time away from the fun stuff, the exciting, the advance forward. I used to call that, as I was a planner, I used to call that forensic planning. You're planning backwards and dealing with the problems in the back and trying to fix those. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question, the 15 FOIs, just out of curiosity, are those primarily to do with TCE? They're right across the board.
Right across the board.
Okay, I just wondered whether they were focused or no shotgun.
No, they're very much across the board. And I think what the other part of that is that they're a lot more complex than we've had in the past. In fact, 15 that we've had so far this year is more than we've had in 2020, 21 and 22 combined. In those years, up until about 2020, most of our FOIs were simply asking for things in building files and whether we had plans and record drawings and so on. These now are complex FOIs asking for every email ever given about a subject. Obviously, then we have to do redactions and all that sort of stuff. They go across the corporation. So take huge amounts of time that we get almost no recoverable fee from. So, I think whereas Margaret and I have been able to do those in, sort of half an hour here and there once every 3 months. Margaret's now spending a huge amount of her time doing these, and then I have to sort of go in and review everything as well. So there's probably for those 15, I'd say we've done at least 200 hours worth of staff time so far this year to do, which is obviously just taken out of everything else.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I want to request the ability to ask a bit of a safe space question. May I do that?
I certainly agree, and I should have done the same myself.
And I wanted to come back to your comments, if I may, Your Worship, because I can only speak for myself, but perhaps others are feeling the same. I think what we're feeling is a frustration, and I think a lot of us just don't really understand some of the delays that are and the challenges that happen within the development world, because we hear from people all the time who are asking, why do projects get to a certain point and then they don't happen? Why did that developer go away? Or why did we you get excited about a particular project and then it just doesn't happen. So and we hear the same, I think, in regards to building permits, that people have challenges sometimes getting a building permit. And I think we just don't have enough information or understanding as to why things just can't happen. And staff, can you help us so that we can have answers for these questions when they come to us, and so that we have more knowledge about what causes these delays and sometimes projects to just simply go away?
Yeah, it's, I'll maybe go first, Rob, and then you. With regard to the first on development, someone, they'll get, you hear about it early when they want to create a lot of excitement about projects. A lot of times at that point in time, they don't know a lot of the details yet. They've got to go through the process. So they go through the process of getting whatever approvals they need, and then for reasons that a lot of times have nothing to do with the municipality, that project's just not going to work from a financial business plan point of view. They're not doing that till later on. They're seeing about approvals first. So those are some of the times that I'm aware of. Or maybe the timing's not right from them to go to market for a particular project. That's being in the development game for so many years. That's, they come through the council and you think it's going to go right away, but it's not, because it's just not right for them to do it. Sometimes, being in the planning world, sometimes things take time to go through. There's so much environmental work. Ensuring the community is sustainable is a big part of planning, and ensuring that the long-term effect, and that takes time to review and go through that planning process and doing it. That's my comment on the planning side. On the building side, our chief building official and building officials are actually not working for the municipality when they're enforcing the Ontario Building Code. They're working actually for the province. Our sole job is to hire qualified individuals. They're making sure that everything is in place under the Ontario Building Code, and I guess they are doing, in a sense, working for the municipality when it comes up to the risk. And if there's something that they're concerned about, not necessarily maybe risk for the municipality, but risk for someone else who might take ownership in that, or who owns that particular situation, that they're protecting them as well. Because there's an expectation on them that when they buy something that's been inspected, that it's been inspected in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. So they're just following theirs. And a lot of times there's misunderstanding on that process. They're complicated, difficult processes at times, and someone just might not understand the process. Can we do better in customer service communications? I believe that it's one of the challenges we're having to do, and you see it on the list because of the time and everything to do that. But it's it really comes down to, in my opinion, to that. I don't know if you want to add to that, Bob.
Yeah, through your worship. So kind of working, Rob said a whole bunch of things. Deputy Mayor had, I think, some specific questions from the developer side. Having worked on that side, having been a consultant, and also being part of a family endeavor on the development end of things. Everything from working on finances to legal agreements to partnerships, wrangling your consultants, all that takes an extraordinary amount of time. While that's happening, market changes, everything from cost of development to regulations on how you can develop, and then getting into the marketplace. Municipality has essentially no control over that. The reality is, I can even say from my perspective, having been involved in development for over 25 years and now being on with kind of part-time with something that my family's undertaking, I'm learning an extraordinary amount of how complex that is. And I thought I knew a whole bunch because I've been doing it for decades. We have, around this table, quite frankly, we have no idea how complicated it is to bring something to market other than just a simple home, you know, with a garage. And as soon as you add multiple units, the amount of information, the legal stuff that you have to do, the certifications, you're dealing with insurances, you're dealing with all your contracts and that. It is just really, really, really complicated. So why do people go away after they've got a certain level of approval? That's on them, and we can't change that, right? Let's take a look at something that received approval not that long ago. Skydev, right? They've kind of gone away. They're doing work from what we hear. They've had a pre-application with us, but there's nothing we can do to make them come to the table. They're trying to clean up their site now. That's something they're working on, and that takes time as well. So there's not much we can do on that end. We're definitely not completely streamlined in our approaches here. That's on us. There's still some hiccups with how we're dealing with all the different departments having input into planning and making sure we can move that forward. There's no real blame to put there. It's just our systems aren't working well right now. And a lot of that is because of the change that's been internally, but also the changes that keep coming down from the province in all manner of areas. So that's something that we can only work on to the best we can. It really, really is one of those things where when we look at some of the finer detail things, when people are complaining about building permits, and I think almost every councillor here has asked me about that, and every time I've sent you the documentation that shows we have been in communication with the people and we're waiting for them to give us something. So I can just say that quite frankly, from the information I've shared with you, which is the record, as those, and I'll put it as those allegations are being tossed, they're inaccurate, and we've shown that. Every time they have to give us something that they're choosing not to, or it's not meeting the code. And the CBO will not approve something that doesn't meet code. The CBO right now and that entire division is dealing with, as Rob was saying, a lot of this deals with risk into the future. There are literally thousands of open files that were never closed properly, and you can only close them with the person that opened them. So there are now people that likely own homes with open permits on them that we can't close with them, and that's a whole nother process. So again, on that one, which is probably the one council hears the most about, get your drawings in, get them done by a professional, and we can move forward. They'll be accurate, and then the CBO can pass it. We have another application right now that's moving forward where we know the work that's being done for what will be a planning application. The team is having a non-planner, they've expressed this to me and Denise, a non-planner write half the report and trying to find a planner who will then finish it up and sign it. I don't know what, we've repeatedly advised them that's probably not helpful. It's going to take you longer to find someone, and then they're still going to have to do the work because it's just like engineering. They're not just going to put their name on it. They're still going to do it. You're probably not saving anybody any time. So when you have folks kind of doing that kind of submission, what do you expect staff to be able to do to fix that? We can't. Those are bad business decisions. And so there's a lot of stuff. We have to take the blame for not being as efficient as we could be, but there's a whole bunch of sides to it, and there's all kinds of pressures that nobody has control over because it's provincial.
So if I may, we're looking at like 2 years or 3 years to open a business in the downtown core, or to move like 2 lots down on Highway 26, that sort of thing. 2 to 3 years is about right.
Opening a business has, unless there's building permit stuff, has nothing to do with us.
Well, there probably are building permits in connection with if you're building a whole new building, but
no, it does not take 2 years to get a building permit. In fact, they have to issue their decisions in, I believe, like 10 days. So if it takes that long, it's a fact that the CBO can't pass it because there's drawings that haven't been submitted. I know one that's taken a while that was, again, say this because it's not only folks that are involved would know what it is, where the person trying to open that business broke through a wall to expand the site without speaking to the landlord, the owner of the building. And then Tammy went out and saw, and that wall was a firewall. So this person did changes without approved drawings, without approval from the landowner. And I know that person has made complaints, and that those complaints have made their way to Facebook and stuff, as if our staff had a problem with that. That is 100% on the person who's trying to open that business. What I'll put it out there. What would council expect staff to do?
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
And thank you. And I know we could talk about this all day, but I know who you're talking about. And I guess part of this is that my understanding is staff are really trying to do things right in Meaford. And perhaps in other municipalities, people, some things fly under the radar, perhaps is a good way to put it. And then if those individuals are here, then they're really challenged when, every single I is dotted. And we hear about it a lot, and sometimes not in a friendly way. And so that then leads us to wonder about, as our mayor mentioned, the can't do attitude. So I just, at some point, perhaps offline, we could explore that further so that, again, we have enough knowledge and a better understanding to help explain those situations, because it's tough for us when we hear people upset because they can't get anything done in their opinion. So we need help with that.
I fully appreciate that. And I can't, and I can only project what the experience might be for counselors. Not a fun part of your job. I totally get that. I would say, because I've seen it plenty of times, especially with my roles with working for planning association, and then when I was president of GTDI as well. A lot of times you're getting stories that are maybe slight exaggerations of how great it was somewhere else. I've heard people say, when I've worked in other municipalities, well, when we were in Brampton, it was so simple, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, I actually know the folks that work there, and know it's a 3-part process where you go to something that's the equivalent of a planning commission, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody is forgiving all your development charges. And so there's a lot of story that's actually being spun to say that we are being far more difficult than other communities. I think just take some of that with a grain of salt. Folks are willing, want council to, predetermine your decisions on something because you want something to come forward, and then they don't follow up on, with their materials afterward. There is no advantage for staff or anyone to hold things up. In fact, it just gunks up the works and makes it harder to get through the files.
Can I ask a question? And that is, do we have at this point in time a sufficient number of staff members in these departments to handle the present workload?
I think generally, yes. I mean, in some ways that's sort of a loaded question, because we could always say more, but no, that's not going to make that much of a difference. I think we're at a stage now where the bigger gains, if you will, in terms of streamlining and that, is just coming down to that interdepartmental to processing, if you will.
To me, I understand full well that we won't see SkyDev built, until they're ready and until they've dotted every I and crossed every T, and I'm sure it will be a good project when it happens. But I can't understand how people who've been in business for 20 years in Meaford, if something has already taken 2 years, why we couldn't maybe look over their shoulder and say, I think if you fix this, this, and this, we can tidy this up. That doesn't seem to be happening. And anyway, there are other questions, and thank you for your time on it. Councillor Urick actually was first, and then Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So both Robins mentioned the one word in there is communication, and I understand that there's great efforts involved in that. So from a developmental process, and this is okay, I'm 6-7 months into this gig, and it's really interesting just trying to find my way about what processes truly are. So I'll ask the question is let's start with large developments. Communication process. So I can give you two examples, like the Stedman's project or the Legion project. So you have a lot of people ask, I can't answer the question. I don't know. I don't know if you know, but okay, and that's the point, because I don't know whether there is a conduit of communication between our planning department and development, because if you do know something that's going on with Stedman's, that for some reason it is not going to, for whatever reason, and if there is reason as to why it's not proceeding, then can that be filtered through to at least council, if not even through a public process? So people can actually go, oh, the Stedman project, where is it at right now? And people can go, and that alleviates so many questions, because a vacuum, creates nothing but water.
Through your worship. So on that one, no, I don't know. So they got their zoning approval. They're now doing stuff that my understanding is not related to that. They have some ideas about something else. There is no public process that, again, from planning, we council may choose that there is a communications thing that we create to let people know. But again, municipality's not in control of that. So there is nothing that we have an obligation to, or that we could even put out there. I have a feeling the same people or similar types of people that are asking about that are, quite frankly, the same ones that are saying the municipality should get a grocery store. The municipality should, but we're not in the grocery business. Last I checked, right? So I think there's some expectations there that somehow council is in control of all these things. It's like, no, you're the approval agency. You don't get to decide you buy the Stedman's building and turn it into a boutique hotel. That was someone else's choice, and they came to you and you went through the approvals. So there's nothing that we can do about that on a communication end of things. And yeah, I get it. People ask us all the time, where's the status with that? And we're like, we can't know unless, and even if they are in communication with us until there's an actual application, we can't be talking about someone else's thoughts about something because it's not really public record then if they just phoned us and asked us a question about it, right? Very difficult.
And I agree. What I'm talking about is what you do know, because what planning department has is first information. You're our first line of information with those. So there could be something going on there that, again, yeah, and I agree with you. The grocery, like, why don't I have another grocery? We're not building anything. That's not what we do. We just green light, you guys go. But if you do know anything, I just don't know how that filters through to us, who tend to be then the conduits of that information to the public because they ask us. So I guess what I'm asking is there some communication methodology that could exist that when you do know something that's pushed to us, so that when somebody asks a question about a BC development, we say, this is all we know right now. This is as far as, this is where the process is right now. I can't even say that with Stedman's or Legion development because I don't know.
I jump in there for a sec because there's an element of privacy and risk associated with this as well. We can probably find ways of telling council what we know. But generally, unless that is being put on our website as part of that development application, you can't tell anybody that because we have no right to announce to one member of the public or all members of the public what the owner of the Stedman's building is doing. They've asked for a zoning change. Now, I think I know what they're doing, but we haven't been told that in any sort of official capacity or as part of any application. So no, we can't tell people. And I think one of the things here, and I think this is true not just about development, but across the board, is that we're a small community. We're a small community that lots and lots of the people in the community have been here for a very long time and are kind of used to knowing everything that's going on because it was pretty easy because you knew all the people who own the properties and so on. I would say you sort of metaphorically, not as in you individually. That's changing because we have lots of out-of-town owners. We have more people trying to come into the community to do different things. And so there isn't that sort of, oh, my wife's sister's best friend is the person running this and so I know what's going on. There's still quite a lot of that, as I know personally, but it is changing. And I think in a bigger community, and I've lived in lots of bigger communities, if there's something happening in something on the main street and you don't know what it is, you just don't know what it is, and you're waiting to see what happens because it's just going to happen. And I think, unfortunately, we do have to get a bit to that stage here, because, we can't announce things or tell people things that we think we know, because then we're putting ourselves at massive legal risk around lost profits, or other people coming to market to take over that space and so on. So we've got to be really cautious on this sort of stuff, and that's why we tend to do stuff officially through our website or at council meetings and so on.
Right, so, and fully appreciate it, and remember, anything I'm asking is through the lens of legality. I would certainly never ask that you would, what rumor is going on about Stedman's this week, so we can pass that on. Everything is through the lens of legality, so all what I'm saying is, at that level, when something is bona fide and known, that's the information that, at least, then we can say to the public, here's exactly where it is, here's exactly what I know about that project. If you want to get into the rumor mongering, knock yourself out, but that's all we can do. But at this point, not even sure where that's at.
And I think from our perspective, what we know when it's an application in process, we have our development site that is kept up to date on when things are real. And we know, and it can be relayed. That's our mechanism. If we do give an approval that it doesn't come through, if it comes through council, obviously it becomes public then. But if there's other approvals that are delegated, now that the province has delegated a lot of site plan approvals to the director, council will be informed of those. It will be on our website that site plan approval has been granted in that instance. So our intent is that when it comes to individual building permits, the notice to the public is a notice on the window that you have your building permit. That building permit is for renovations. It doesn't tell you what business is coming, and our chief building official doesn't know that, and they've been just dealing with it. It's just what they're that they're doing renovations. That's all it is. So it is very difficult in doing that. So
Councillor Bartley would like to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner, and kind of answering Shirley's question. And in defense of staff, it's very frustrating when you get a call from a constituent, well, they're not giving me my building permit. Well, so I went to staff, and staff can't tell me because I'm a third party. They don't have permission to give me information on somebody else's file. So I obtained permission from these two different people back to staff. Now they can talk to me. And this is, for instance, well, we can't give them a building permit because they have to do this. So I take this back to the constituent, you have to do this. Well, we don't think we have to do that. Well, the building code says you do. Okay, so as a third party negotiator, we got both the issues solved, but it's a matter of staff is saying, you got to do this. Well, we don't think we have to do that. Well, where did you become an expert in building codes? Because that's the code. So they can't tell us what's going on with everything because legally they can't. They have a contract with that applicant. But I received permission from two different applicants to get the knowledge, and it worked out. And staff wasn't to blame on either one of them, but everybody was pointing the finger at them. So in defense of staff, probably not always right. Nobody is, but that has happened recently.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks to everyone for joining in. Okay, we've got developers, private businesses, homeowners. They maintain they have problems with the planning and the building department. The good folks in the planning and building department maintain we've got problems with these people. I'm neutral. I accept what everyone says. This isn't new. This has been going on, I'm going to say, for 3 or 4 years. In particular, it's maybe further back than that, there's always been some people uneasy with what they've been told. But the last 3 or 4 years, this problem is mounting. Mr. Uri a while ago used the word culture, and there is a culture here, and it's a very unsavory one. There's no use of us. I don't think any use of us going on, pointing fingers one direction or the other. How do we resolve this? How do we get beyond this culture? How do we get out of it? If we can't eliminate it, how do we at least soften it and make it so everybody, regardless of what side you're coming from, can at least be progressive to a degree. That to me is the problem here. Is I mean, we can, as I say, point fingers for the next 3 or 4 years. Is that going to make the situation in our municipality any better? I don't think so.
I think,
Yeah.
CEO.
If I can, good discussion. Sort of ties to those two things that I haven't got to in the presentation. So if I just take us back, maybe we'll continue on and have a little further discussion. Software implementation. We're looking to, it's working now, but needs to be really enhanced is our building permit process, where people can go on and see where your building permit is. This is all about process improvements, and those are things that we as staff would like to work on. Rob talked about the situation with development and third-party review and all that. We didn't have a lot of developments. We had some, but they were very manageable by the small planning team that we had, and we did it all within the planning division. The developments are much more and cannot be done in that manner, and we're continually looking for process improvements and ways to do it. We're working with the engineering team, and we were driven to have a slate of engineers to review. That's more firms to manage, more staff time to do that. It's not efficient. There's inconsistencies. So we're looking at improving that situation where we have back to where it was quite a few years ago, whereas we have one engineering firm that we know that we can deal with and deal with that. So we as staff are looking to make those improvements because we realize that we believe there can be better education, better process improvements in doing that. And we're doing that. Talked to Rob earlier last week on the planning reports and what you need to deal with under planning and what you need to deal with under detailed site plan review, and making sure that we're being more efficient and effective in that manner. So we are committed to do that, and we know there's frustration on the other side, and we're doing that. So
Thank you, Robin. If I could just go on record, you know that this council has made it clear, I believe, that we have no problem providing more resources to deal with more development. We understand that it's not going to be easy, but and I believe there's every desire to equip you as quickly and as much as needed to have a more efficient approach to this whole area. So thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, there's on Rob's point, when we do have to go to external experts to provide the kind of review that we can't do in-house. The reality is that those organizations aren't able to deliver it quite often as fast as we'd like. So when we have a situation where, let's say through that review, then there's something that's being asked that the applicant then also needs to do. They then also find that same challenge when they're out there trying to find, a lot of times it's engineers, right? That kind of thing they're just, all the folks out there are overworked. The firms do not have the people. So when we have to go out to those that we have contracts with to provide that service, it's taking longer than expected and longer than they'd like it to, but that's what's happening. And then again, on the other side, the applicant also is stuck with that. Again, without naming names, I'm aware that the mayor and deputy mayor have been told about someone who plans on opening a building that they're going to construct between now and September. That's impossible. Actually impossible. From a building that hasn't started now to be in it in September. When you're told those kinds of things and then come to us and saying, wondering when that delay happens, that deadline was impossible to begin with. And then the question is about what are we doing? And if, this, again, safe space, what have you, it's a public meeting with council. I would like a bit of clarity from Councillor Greenfield when he's referring to the word that there's an unsavory sort of feeling here. I think that's something I'd like some more clarity on. Unless I was massively mistaken, that was directed at staff. And I'd like to know what that is, because I think that's inappropriate. Unless you can be really clear about what unsavory means. Thank you very much.
I was referring to the pushback between developers, homeowners, what have you, blaming staff for delays. And then, as you have mentioned, hey, staff has some problems with, information or lack of information primarily. And it's this friction between the residents and staff. That's to me, that's unsavory. I'd like to get rid of that. I'd like to get over that. I'd like that not to be there. So that's what I was meaning by an unsavory situation. It wasn't directed at, in one direction or the other. I hope I don't do that. I don't try to do that. As I said, I try to be neutral, and I just want this this maybe seeming delay. If we can do better on it.
And with that, if I can, then I will apologize for that misunderstanding. That's me letting my ego get in the way. I take it very seriously, though, to protect my staff, because they get these complaints from applicants who aren't willing to give us what they are legally required to, or they're making up stories about how long it's taking. My staff is feeling the pressure of this to a level that is quite concerning in terms of being able to keep them here. And that's something that then maybe I'm got my sort of back up a little too much on that, but that is one of my jobs here, is to protect my staff so that they can do the good service for the municipality. Sorry about that.
And likewise, I find that I'm trying to encourage developers to stay here and not pull up stakes and go because of this us and them, mentality, so anything that council can do to alleviate that or further, help staff in moving forward, I'm very sure, just bring it to us and we'll endeavor to help. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the things that council can do to make this better is be aware of the language that you are using. Mayor Kentner, you've just said this us and them attitude. There is no us and them attitude from any municipal staff member.
But there is out in the public.
But when you talk like that, what our staff here and what the public here is that municipal staff are saying that. And there isn't. What municipal staff are saying is that we have to do things properly. Now, maybe 10 years ago, things weren't done so properly. I can't comment on that, but maybe that was the case and maybe things were easier. But we take great pride in the fact that we do what we have to do in the best way that we possibly can and protect the corporation that you are the leaders of. So we are protecting you in the way that we work. We have no attitude about anybody or about anything beyond we need to do the things that we need to do. So, it's really important that we all think about the words that we use, because there's been several comments today using different words that have pretty significant connotations. That upsets our staff. I can tell you now that there is probably a significant number of our staff who have this meeting sitting, playing in the background as they do their work today, and there'll be conversation going on around the office right now about the things that are being said today. That has a major impact. I know there are people listening in the public who are hearing this and hearing these conversations, and that has a major impact as well. Words are really important. And, I do words for a living. I spend a lot of time thinking about the words that I use and the way that I use them. But that in itself is something that we all can do to help, is think about what we're saying and not necessarily what you mean by it, but how it is interpreted, because that's the impact.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And I agree, Matt, and verbiage is everything. And I think what we're trying to do here is not us saying us and them, is we are the conduit often to you that you maybe don't hear in another way. So what we're telling you is what the perception we're hearing so that you understand it. So by me or Harley, or I'm not going to speak for Harley, but for anybody saying us and them, I'm not sitting here saying that it is us and them. I'm saying XYZ is saying it's us and them, and we have to deal with that perception, because perception is reality. And again, I will also kind of tamper that with, we know that negative leads. We will hear more complaints than you will ever hear from somebody saying, you're doing a great job. You don't hear that, you only hear the complainers. So we have to address that. So when there's an us and them scenario, yes, that's through the lens of, we know that there are people out there that aren't happy with the circumstance because maybe they can't get something done. But if we can't bring that to your table and let you know that that exists, then this conversation is moot.
So I guess I'll just finish through the slides now. Just some of the other things we have is asset management. To be honest with you, I think it ties into our facilities. It ties into everything we do. We're legislated to do our non-core assets and then levels of service. And then in this term of council, it's big. It's going to require a lot of work. We're mandated to do it. It's one of our key priorities, although it's not listed as a project. It is one of the things that we have to do on investing in infrastructure and looking after our infrastructure. Customer service, and I'm not talking about customer service, front desk customer service. I'm talking about customer service across and our ability to respond to people, and we are working on improving that. Our website is one of the core aspects of providing information to the public, and we have challenges with that, and you can't just flip a switch and have a new website. It's one of the things that we need to look at going forward, and providing that basis, and it's going to require a lot of work to overhaul that. Just some of the things that drive municipal choices, legislative requirements, and as we know, it seems like every month we're getting a new level of legislation that's coming our way that we have to figure out how we're going to adapt and what we do in relation to that, and also how it impacts our costs. In particular, one of the things is this excess soil thing. I think it's mentioned a little later, but it's driving up costs of every project that we do involved in, because we have to find places for our soil to go now. Day-to-day requirements, levels of service decisions. Obviously, levels of service dictate how we do things and affect costs. Example, how often do we very simply down to empty garbage cans in our parks? Obviously, we can do it a lot more often, but it comes at costs that require staff and things to do that. So those are always things that drive our choices going forward. Limited resources. We know as council setting the budget that we have limited finances, that we want to look at our taxpayers and not impact them beyond their capability. So there's limitations that the availability of contractors. I'll show you a slide on that, and also staffing and what we deal with in relation to that. Long-term financial planning. We're going to have some significant debt coming forward with a sewage plant expansion to deal with all this growth that we're having. And we need to make sure that we are managing our debt smartly so that on the go forward, so that we don't create a problem that we can't do further projects because we're funding debt. External changes, stuff happening beyond our means. Conservation authorities changing how they do business. You'll hear later. So we have to adapt to that and figure out stuff there. The public demand and what they want of our service. I look back to when I came here 13 years ago, and what the public is demanding now is increased, and what we deliver and what we expect. Asset management. Are we doing preventative, or are we doing reactive maintenance on a lot of our stuff? Because it affects the long-term aspects. Climate change, it is impacting stuff we do. And then staff recruitment and retention. Some existing pressure points. A lot of senior staff. We're not a very big organization, so a lot of senior staff get drawn into or have to deal with day-to-day or significant stuff that takes us away from a lot of the long-term stuff planning that we as senior staff are supposed to be doing. The long-going consequences of legacy decisions or non-actions. I spoke to some of those on the legal side before because it was ignored 30, 40 years ago. We now are dealing with it now because we have to. Because we as staff feel we're committed that we need to deal with it. We're not going to be that group that turned a blind eye to it and not deal with it. The lack of time for internal improvements. One of the big things that came out of the service delivery review that we did is a whole bunch of process mapping charts on how we can improve our levels of service to make life both easier for the public, but also easier for staff in processing that. But that takes time to implement change. Change management takes a lot of time to do it properly. And it's just our ability to do that, to have those improvements in the long term. The lack of time and resources for major requirements like asset management. Inflation means existing capital financing cannot deliver on the long-term requirements. And I've got a slide that sort of shows you what's been happening over the last little bit. We look at some of the changes, 2019 to 2023. We know the legislative changes I spoke about, the asset management side. It's been a moving target. I look back and what we were supposed to have done 5 years ago, luckily the province has given us more time, but that's and changed the rules a bit on that. But that takes time to adapt to those changes and then do the actual work. We know the Planning Act changes have been massive and are still coming at us, still some to be proposed. Development charges. We still don't see the regulations on what we're going to be able to collect financially on that, and really creates a challenge for us long-term planning and what growth will pay for and what's going to be exempt. I spoke about the soil regulations, and we continually know more and more is constantly coming. If we get a change in government into the future, obviously we know there's going to be even more because they're going to be going in different directions. Constantly involved in emergency or time-sensitive things that pull staff away from some of these key projects. We're still dealing with long-term COVID impacts. I'm not talking about health impacts. I'm talking about the impacts that COVID had on costs and labor and people's the ability who you can get to work. Changing community demands, increased costs, and staffing issues, which I already spoke of. So just on the staffing, just to let you know, the number of recruitments that we've had. I think it's key that every year we're seeing at least, except for 2020, which was nobody was moving anywhere in 2020 because that's when we're into COVID. But every year we're getting a changeover in staff that requires training, that requires education. And that those include replacement positions, whether they're permanent or temporary in the case of a maternity leave, or new positions that council has approved through the budget process. Tender responses. This is important because the less and less people you get bidding on proposals, likely the more and more less competitive it is and the prices are going up. So you can see in 2023, our average response to tenders are 2.6. Whereas you look back in 2021 or we were up to 5 in 2022 is 4.23. We don't have 2018 and 2019 because to do that, we would have to go back into every individual folder and check the number of responses on every individual tender. So it was very time consuming for staff to grab that data. But now that we're on the bids and tenders site, we can pull those reports on the number of bids on that. The average registrants, those people who are looking at it, just so you know what that column is. So the average number of people that look at a tender is 10.5, but only 2.6 are bidding on that tender.
I have a question here from Councillor Bartley.
Thank you. Rob, can I ask you, the 2.65, is that the actual amount of people that bid or the amount of actual acceptable bids?
I imagine it's people that bid.
That number decreases once you take out the unacceptable bids because there always are some.
Construction costs, and the important thing about this slide is to show how we are doing in relation to the 1.5% for roads, bridges, and facilities. So you can see how our increase in base funding has gone up year over year from 2018 to 2023. Looks really good. Increase from the previous year. Then we can, as a percentage, then we look at the non-residential building consumer or construction price index. So this is what's fed to us, and it's what we utilize to do our development charges, indexing year over year typically. Basically, what we can see in the last couple of years, we're still doing good, but we're following a bit behind on that 1.5. I think this is more just to say, hold the line. We need to continue on this path. It's still not funding our long-term asset needs, but it's more to hold the line on doing what we're doing. We know that other communities aren't even doing this, and I think, but don't say this is the savior because we know it's not covering it all. But I think that was the intent of showing this. And then it's highlighting some of the construction costs. You can see how some of the costs have just gone through the roof, I guess, on some things. In particular, we've got service treatments, sidewalks, our water main, almost, and how much it's gone up year over year. Where you see a blank, it's because we had never tendered for that product in that year, so we don't have a comparable price. But these are the prices of stuff, so it's just showing you those things. This is just intended to bring a home analogy on managing your house, and similar to managing your priorities and prioritizing where you're going to do put your money. So there's the must-to-haves that you have to finance, and then the nice-to-haves, such as the pool and decisions and how that can relate to municipal priorities, as well as how we spend our money based on what we have. And really, that's council strategic priorities is really about that exercise. In addition, off the slide, you have those things that are that you have to pay, such as your property taxes and your utility bills and things like that. So those are all expenses out the window. So this is just a bit of analogy as you think about your strategic plans for this community. You could actually, if it assists you a bit, think about it as managing your home and those type of things. So where do we go from here? Tomorrow, you will receive the current draft of all the project charters based on that list that you're provided. to review and be prepared when you come back to the workshop on July 25th. We'll also, based on that, we'll think about the tagline, if that's, want to have a discussion about that, if we can do that as well. Some of these have dates, like will be done in Q1 of 2023, or not done in 2023 because that's past, but has specific dates because, like I said, they're projects that are ongoing, we're doing right now. Others that don't have dates, and we'll have a bit of discussion on over the next 4 years in your term, when do we think we can fit it in based on all of those other resources. We've identified potential timelines on how much staff resources, how much time we think it will take to do some of these things. They're estimates based on our best guess on timeline. So just you can consider that. So that's the intent of the session on the 25th. And these will be shared with you tomorrow. We're just wrapping them up, making sure that they're in the form, but I will distribute them for your use to go through and take a look at them and review them. If you have any questions or want some seek clarification, please reach out to, you'll notice when you look at, well, you've been sure of the short-term rental one, so you know who the project manager is, but you'll see under one, it says project manager, who that person is, or the position anyways. Please go reach out to that person, ask your questions so that you can come prepared or answer your questions in advance of the workshop. We're more than willing to sit down and go over and explain things to you in that. I think council is familiar with the format based on the short-term rental. It was very important to take you through that process so you understand the layout of that. So we can do that. So, and then hopefully following that, we can finalize the strategic plan and bring it to council. And I think I already talked about the next slide, which was the wrap up. I already talked to that and thing. So just something to be aware of. Yes.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarity, Mr. Armstrong, the list of the charters that we will receive, are our staff suggesting that we go forward with all of them, or are you looking to us to make some decisions about which ones or which order or anything of that nature?
I think part of the first workshop was to, and we had a lot of discussion on that, whether it is a priority or not. I would just think in the next 4 years, is this big enough that we should be doing it? Is there something else that we haven't included in there that we should be? It's just more of a message to you to think about that as you go through them. We're not saying these are your priorities, so we're not here to tell you what they should and shouldn't be. It's more about you thinking, just having that thought, and whether you believe that it's most important that we achieve that in the next 4 years or go through that process.
Thanks again, Your Worship. Through you, Rob, if I can just back up a bit. The asset management to me is well, always a big circle. A few years ago now, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, we had an employee seconded for about 1.5 years and worked on our asset management. And I believe that at the end of his journey, I was of the impression that our asset management was pretty well up to date. Now, I know it's ongoing, assets change and the management of it has changed. So do we at least have a real good solid base for going forward with the asset management situation?
Through Your Worship. So I am currently the staff member who is I guess, dealing or taking over the responsibility of asset management for our municipality. In 2022, you received a report with regards to our core asset management plan. That is where we are at to date. We are working on the non-core asset management plan, but we have a long way to go. So while I wasn't here when that happened, but while we are making steps in the right direction, we still have a lot of knowledge to gain with regards to asset management, and a lot of work to do on our asset management plan. I will be completing a workshop with this group sometime before the end of the year to provide some of the kind of basics about asset management planning. I know that some of you from previous council terms have seen information on asset management planning, but to ensure that all of council is up to date on asset management planning and where we are at is very important. And so we'll be doing a workshop with you to make sure that happens. But we definitely are not done with our asset management journey, as we only have a portion of our assets in our asset management program right now. And even with that being said, we've only looked at our existing levels of service. And so we will be, as part of the mandated provincial requirements and just good asset management in general, coming forward to council with information on different asset funding models, because right now with our current levels of service and identified in that 2022 report that you received, we are currently not, with our current levels of service, we are not properly funding those assets. So we have backlogs. Most of our pieces of infrastructure, so those looked at the core assets, so water, roads, wastewater, storm, sewer, and bridges. We have significant backlogs in the tens of millions in each of those categories. And so we're going to be really digging in over the next couple of years to figure out maybe how we can change some of those levels of service, how we can focus more on preventative maintenance, because every dollar you spend on preventative maintenance, you're saving tens of dollars on reactive maintenance, and really how we can move forward with some of our programs to help fund our existing infrastructure or figure out ways to do things differently to figure out those funding models. So we have a lot of work to go, but we, as has been identified, like there have been strides in the right direction to help fund our assets, but we will continue to be working on the asset management planning process and bringing it forward to council as we continue through it.
Right.
Well, thank you for that, Victoria. And if you are in charge of that area, my mind is at ease.
Can I ask a quick question, Tori, too? And that is just during the last term, and I think fairly early in the last term, which was my first term, I recall discussion about a rationalization of assets. And when I say that, I was thinking more of buildings and properties, not things like infrastructure, like under the ground, but buildings and facilities. And I wonder where that sits.
So through your worship, as one of your strategic priorities is, I think, where we're really going to be looking at that. I don't remember the exact title, but it was facility rationalization. And so with my asset management hat on and my soon to be facilities hat on, as well as some of that longer term planning, me and Matt have started to kind of work on what that looks like, kind of developing the project charter for council, but then also kind of looking at some of those next steps to continue to move forward on that. So that will be coming, but that is one of the project charters that you will be seeing tomorrow and reviewing over the next month or so. And so that will be a great opportunity when we meet on the 25th of July to talk about that more and maybe see where things could shift in different directions, depending on how council wants that process to go.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And with your permission, I'd like to come back to one of your earlier comments. You mentioned a community visioning process, and we did hear a lot about that during the campaign period before this past election. And I know Matt suggested that if we wanted to do that, that should be considered perhaps as a priority if council agreed. And I just wanted to hear from staff how you suggest an exercise like that might go forward, what the advantages would be, how it fits in with our strategic priorities, and just to give us something to think about. How would you see that rolling out?
I think if we wanted to undertake and really it's what vision we're looking for. We got a council's vision, we have our growth vision and what we want to protect under our official plan. So there is a vision, big part of the official plan. We intend to look at as part of our economic development side and our go forward on what we want to attract, having someone assist us with that process with the committee. If we wanted to go back and revisit the municipal vision, the overall municipal vision, I'd be very concerned about the fact that you're establishing priorities, then creating a vision, and then you have to redo your priorities because it may not align with the vision. If we've never really done, except for the official plan, it hasn't been a public consultation. It's always been council deciding what the vision is, and that's the one you have. Ever since I've been here on that, I think it would be a project if you wanted to go down that road that would inquire someone to come in and lead that process through a public consultation element. I can't see us being able to do that internally and that.
I guess my sort of add on to that is a question back to all of you as council, and you mentioned, Shirley, that people were asking about this during the election, and I guess I don't know what it was they were specifically asking for. What do they mean, and what do you mean when you talk about a visioning exercise? Is it, as Councillor Urick was talking about earlier, a tagline? Is it a development plan, in which case the official plan? You know, when you got those questions during the election, what were people asking for? What does a community vision mean as far as they're concerned? Because that would affect how we would go about it.
Yes, exactly right. And I think looking back on those conversations, it was coming from a place of sort of, an overarching vision that will potentially, guide some of these processes. So I think the discussion we had earlier today is part of that. How do we, really understand where we are now and look at where we want to go and really define that. And I think we have, some very wise community residents who would like to be part of that process, even though we have no one here today, but I'm sure some are listening and paying close attention. So I will certainly go back to those individuals and further understand their concept of what that sort of exercise could look like. But I don't want to give up on it without really exploring and understanding what it could bring in addition to what we're already doing.
My personal opinion, when I was told before the election about the vision, and I was providing examples, it's a municipal strategic plan. So that's really what I saw as the vision, in addition to the official plan, in addition to maybe something that we do from a business attraction point of view and what we want to attract. I really see that. My only comment to council is with adding this other process into the mix, I really challenge you on what you think the outcome would be. And is it worth the effort in going through that process, or do what we have is to me, it is our vision. The official plan, a lot of public input, as you're aware, into that, and actually really that confirmed our vision is right under the official plan. And then those 4 pillars, and maybe with some tweaking, but I would just challenge you not to think about a process just for the sake of going through a process, making sure it's worthwhile and the outcomes, and it would be very valuable if you're considering that.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. And I agree, Rob. I don't think it's reinventing the wheel. I think it's tweaking, truly. I think that's what we're talking about here. Because I think when you look through here, and I think what, and I don't want to misinterpret what Deputy Mayor said, but to me, it's about, when you talk about vision, and I've heard this talked about, and again, in the pre-election process, is literally, what is Meaford going to be when it grows up? Are we going to be an ag town? Are we going to be a culture town? Are we going to be a tourist town? That kind of definition. I look through the 4 pillars, and it really doesn't even have the word ag in there anywhere. So what is our overbroad, like, again, think of it as marketing terms. When I talked about the tagline as well, yeah, we have the bones of what we want to be to strengthen our community and do all those things. Those pillars define that. But what is our long-term vision about what this community is literally going to be? And I think that's what people question. Well, like, I can't really answer. Somebody asked me that question right now. What's the long-term vision? Is Meaford going to be a tourist town? Is Meaford going to be an ag town? What's it going to be? This talks about the pillars of creating great infrastructure control, about growth, about all that. But what are we? And I think that's the visioning I'm hoping we're talking about when we talk about volunteers and community groups and municipal leaders out there. That's what the big question seems to be. And maybe Main Streets will at least cater into that a little bit about, as well as that can feed that fire about what we're going to be and what, you know, because that to me is a burning question. That beyond the nuts and bolts, I think needs a little bit more addressing.
And for what it's worth, I think people define their vision very much as what Meaford is not. I hear it's not a retirement community. It's not another high-rise mishmash. It's not a tourist town. It's not an energy town. So I think, you know, that is part of the problem in doing this is if we end up with 16 things that we're not and not one that we are or want to be, it's going to be a problem. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner, and I do hesitate to say this. I don't want to get in a fight with the rest of the councillors, but it would bother me to go into months of deliberations with the community to come up with a bit of wordsmithing to change all this, and that's all that's going to happen. It's a little wordsmithing. It says council's vision. The 7 of us were elected to be the council. This is our vision. If you've got people telling you what should be in there, bring it forward and let's do it without a great big public consultation process to do a little bit of wordsmithing. That would bother me. Thank you.
Mr. Voigt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community engagement is one of the things that I've been doing for a long time. It's actually part of my work that I enjoy. I think there's real value, perhaps, throwing this out there, that maybe this is, if an add-on, is more of about a community conversation. I do believe the councillor that last spoke, if it is just about refining a vision, I think you are correct that it will just be a wordsmithing. You could pick any 100 communities in Ontario. They're all going to say some variation of, we want to be the nicest thing we can be in this place, speaking to something or another. It's always lollipops and rainbows. Your Worship, you said something about defining ourselves, or there's a bit of a sense of trying to define ourselves by what we're not, right? We kind of do that sometimes nationally too. You know, we're not Americans or what have you, right? Well, let's define ourselves by what we are and not based on our fears. And maybe that's a community conversation, because we will always be an agricultural community, assuming agriculture is viable and we can support that. But those land uses aren't changing. There are, we'll be a waterfront community because we are. What do we do with it? And what controls are there? There's official plans, there's the Main Street thing, there's regulations, there's market forces that will always make us influenced by what's happening, to the giant over in the village. There's things there that influence us. Maybe it's a community conversation, and maybe that's a slightly different thing I would put out there, where there would be a value for councillors and citizens to come together and look at all the things that are telling us what we're going to become and get on board that way. I couldn't give you an answer right now what that looks like. And maybe that is something that council thinks about and sits down with staff to look at that in the future. I'd see as that more valuable than just coming up with some words that you can put on a plaque and say, there it is now. Now, we all need to be rowing in the same direction.
More conversation on this, or are we ready to maybe adjourn? We have another meeting at 1 o'clock. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
We just need to
Deputy
come out of
Mayor?
committee of the whole first,
Oh, we
please.
don't need it. So you're right. Sorry. We need to vote to get out of committee of the whole. Mover and seconder for that. So the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield, all in favor? We have exited committee of the whole. And there's a.
And we don't need a
That-
motion
that's
to
a-
adjourn,
that's
so we
a-
can just adjourn.
So motion to adjourn? No, you
We don't
it.
need one.
Okay. Thank you.